We have two major developing stories at this hour. The first involved the same perpetrator, the same kind of crime, the same type of victims, all boys under the age of 18. They are common themes in the sex scandal involving former New Hanover County teacher Mike Kelly. Attorneys for Kelly's victims are seeking a class action lawsuit. WECT's Ann McAdams heard the attorneys lay out the reason for their suit. What else did they have to say, Ann?
Well, John, attorneys for the Rhine Law Firm and the Lee Schultz Law Firm filed this lawsuit about 4 o'clock this afternoon. They hope that a judge will let them proceed with a class action suit, but regardless, they are pursuing civil action against New Hanover County schools. Now, they say there were too many warning signs that administrators missed, dating back more than 15 years since Kelly started violating his students on school grounds. Kelly pleaded guilty to 59 charges in June. Less than a week later, Deputy Superintendent Rick Holliday, who was principal at the school where Kelly's first crimes occurred, abruptly resigned. These attorneys say the other top administrators also have to go.
And the way you make behavior change is you file these lawsuits and you make them pay that money. Because that's all they seem to be caring about, their reputation and their money.
Another breaking news story. More of Michael Kelly's former students have joined the lawsuit against New Hanover County schools.
The suit alleges that the school system and the administration knew of Kelly's sexual misconduct while he taught at 2 high schools in New Hanover County, but they did nothing to protect the students. WECT's Emily Featherston has the new details tonight. What did you find out, Emily?
Well, John, like you said, 3 new alleged victims have signed on to this lawsuit, bringing the total number to 6. According to the attorneys, those alleged victims currently range in age from 17 to 23 years old and were students in New Hanover County during the period between 2006 and 2018.
Big developments in Raleigh today that could impact a lawsuit against New Hanover County schools. The House and Senate passed a sweeping bill that would extend the statute of limitations for child sex crime victims. WECT's Ann McAdams has been following that lawsuit. And what would this change?
Fran, it expands the number of victims who are eligible to sue. The lawsuit was filed by victims of Michael Kelly, a former high school science teacher who recently pleaded guilty to dozens of sex crimes against his own students, sometimes at school. Until now, victims were only guaranteed the right to sue in civil court until they turned 21. This law gives them until the age of 28 to pursue monetary relief, which attorneys say is important because many victims are not ready to come forward until years after the abuse. In the case of Mike Kelly, some of his crimes date back to the 1990s, and victims have only recently come forward.
We continue to follow a developing story at this hour. For the 3rd time in 2 years, a New Hanover County Schools employee is charged with sex crimes against students.
Peter Frank is now suspended with pay. The band instructor at Roland Grice Middle School faces a dozen felony charges, 6 counts of indecent liberties with a child, and 6 counts of indecent liberties with a student by a teacher. He was in court for the first time today. WECT's Alex Garino was at his first court appearance. Alex, you learned more charges are likely to come.
Yes, District Attorney Ben David says they anticipate further charges in addition to the 12 felony counts Frank is already facing. A judge denied Frank's request for a court-appointed attorney. He's in jail under a $750,000 conditional bond. If Frank makes bond, he will be under ankle monitoring surveillance and have a curfew. The judge also ordered him to stay away from schools and have no contact with minors. We learned the Attorney General's office will prosecute this case, and that's because of a potential conflict of interest. The investigation first began when a woman who was one of Frank's students more than 15 years ago reported an incident to someone in the DA's office. The worker in the DA's office and the former student were both in Frank's band class at Roland Grice. Even with all the charges against Frank, DA Ben David encourages any other possible victims to come forward and urges adults to advocate for the children in this community.
We as adults need to model that behavior too. We have a responsibility to our young people that if we see something, we should say something.
One of Frank's former students tells us she is not shocked by the charges. Jana did not want to give us her last name. She told us she is not a direct victim of what happened, but looking back, she says she remembers that other girls spent a lot of time in Frank's office. Jana says she also remembers certain comments he made or ways he would touch other students' shoulders during class. She says other students had their own suspicions, but being so young, they didn't think much about what was happening.
And you're very impressionable, and when you have a teacher who's one of your favorite teachers, you know, that's not something that you want to believe, but you also know that, you know, if you're insecure or, you know, you have things going on in your life and they're there to support you or help you, and, you know, you're not looking at that as someone coming on to you or making a comment to you, you know, about you look nice today or something. You know, it's not something you're looking at as being sexual or misconduct, but it makes you feel better about yourself. But looking back now, it's just not an appropriate thing to be saying to your students.
Now, Jana also says Frank made an inappropriate comment on a picture she posted on social media on her 21st birthday, several years after she was a student. She says she hopes that other possible victims are willing to come forward, especially if it will help those who already have. The New Hanover County School Board is considering releasing part of Peter Frank, a teacher's personnel file. The story is still developing at this hour. School board members made the announcement during a news conference that followed the release of search warrants that detail several instances of inappropriate conduct between Frank and female middle school students. The band teacher at Roland Grice Middle School is in jail tonight, charged with a dozen sex crimes offenses. WECT's Anna Phillips attended that news conference earlier tonight. Now, Anna, you say tensions seem to be running pretty high among the board members.
Yeah, John, I'd say so. It's a difficult topic, and some board members are more willing than others to speak openly after 3 cases of sexual crimes against students by teachers in the last 2 years. A statement was read.
We acknowledge that a 3rd arrest for sexual abuse in less than 2 years is jarring and concerning to everyone.
And questions were taken, but answers are sparse. The Board of Education points to state personnel laws that prevent them from speaking on ongoing cases.
There's a desire to be completely open, to just be as open as possible. And when you see that that's not how it works, that in fact that could be very detrimental to our system, to our students. That's difficult because people do want information and people do deserve information.
Tensions are apparent between board members. Judy Justice openly saying she witnessed a culture of cover-ups as a teacher decades ago.
A lot of things were going on that were not, even if they were reported, they were swept under the rug, that I saw from my position as a teacher. I left and came back after 16 years, and lo and behold, it was still going on.
Justice says they should now take responsibility.
And to find out how we can go forward so we can alleviate the fears and to make sure these pedophiles don't come into our system.
The first letter put in Peter Frank's personnel file dates back to 1999. It says Frank took a student home and played video games for several hours. A second letter went into the file in 2013. Saying Frank made an inappropriate comment on a student's social media post that showed her in a bathing suit. He's even accused of kissing one of his middle school students. The warrant says during the investigation, detectives found several images of middle school aged girls on Frank's phone. It appears the pictures were taken without the student's knowledge. When asked about them, the warrant says Frank confessed to being sexually attracted to middle school aged females.
Attorney Brian Schultz explained they are in the discovery phase of the class action civil lawsuits against the school system for how it handled the case involving Mike Kelly. The same lawyers are looking into whether a similar case will be filed in the investigation of Peter Frank. Schultz says it's evident there has been a long culture of silence within the school system.
We're still actively looking for witnesses. I think that there are people that were been embarrassed, scared to step forward. And I think that that's one of among the real tragedies is that when you go and you finally get the guts to say something, you finally get the guts to go and tell somebody, and then it's swept under the rug, you get victimized twice.
Tonight, during a forum held by the New Hanover County Schools United for Students group, we heard from a parent who says her son was a victim. She says he was one of the several students Kelly groomed. The former Teacher of the Year pleaded guilty to nearly 60 sex crime charges involving students. The parent said Kelly normalized his behavior by telling his students that his actions were preparing them for college and fraternities. She recalled the moment she and her son learned Kelly admitted the school district knew of his actions and allowed him to keep teaching.
When we read the news article and it said this had been reported a long time ago, my son just looked at me like, they knew? They knew this would have to happen to me?
She also gave other parents advice on how to help their children and acknowledged that the legal process is a long one and takes patience.
Demands tonight for the new Hanover County School Superintendent to be removed. Parents pack a new Hanover County School Board meeting. Alex, this is the second time this week the board met and did not mention the sex scandal. Parents, though, want action.
Yeah, Fran, John, they do, but they didn't get it tonight. The meeting left parents more frustrated than ever.
They did what they always do. They went into closed session and then they came out and did nothing.
We're done with excuses and we're done with blindly sending our children to schools you govern where they're clearly not safe.
You have done nothing to keep our children safe. They are still preyed upon by sexual predators.
Seems like a cover-up to me.
As a constituent, as a voter, and as a concerned parent, to call for the resignations, the immediate resignations of Superintendent Tim Markley, Chairwoman Lisa Eastep, and the following board members: David Wortman, Jeanette Nichols, Bill Rivenbark, Nelson Ballou, and Stephanie Adams, leaving Judy Justice the only person to sit on this board.
I call for the immediate termination of Tim Markley.
We call for the immediate termination of our superintendent for his role in over 2 decades of corruption and covering up child sexual abuse.
And I call for an investigation into all board members as well as all admins in the district.
We call for a complete change in leadership from top to bottom.
I feel that this is really a top-down issue. I don't know any other way to look at it.
If I do something bad at school, I could get suspended or expelled. But if a teacher hurts a child, they keep their job. People should be held accountable if they do something wrong.
This shows how desperate this situation has become. Being a religious person, maybe it'll take a child to move the hearts of the adults.
I have never been embarrassed to say that I work at Roland Rice. I've spent the majority of my career in that school. This is my 9th year there. And I mean, I was embarrassed to wear my badge.
They all are lawyered up and they're protecting themselves and not the students.
Despite repeated calls for Dr. Markley to be removed, he's still on the job tonight. Another high-ranking school administrator, though, is not. Dr. John Welmers, the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, resigned. No reason was given. In fact, it didn't even come up in the meeting tonight. We found out from a press release sent out during the meeting. The school board has called a special meeting for Thursday.
Dr. Tim Markley is no longer the superintendent of New Hanover County Schools.
The school board unanimously voted to approve his resignation after meeting in closed session for more than 5 hours. His resignation comes amidst growing outrage from families and the community over the third school employee to be charged with sex crimes against students in 2 years.
I truly hope he gets charged by the SBI.
Thousands of people have signed a petition requesting Rick Holliday's name be removed from the football stadium at Laney High School.
The former Laney High School principal abruptly retired from his job with New Hanover County Schools this past summer in the midst of a teacher sex abuse scandal. WBCT's MCADAMS met with the man who started the petition today and what prompted him.
Fran and John, Chris Sutton is a Laney High School graduate who says he has friends who were abused at Laney High School. He says then Principal Rick Holliday knew about it and did nothing to stop it.
Could you imagine being an alum and you played on that field and you go back there and every single time you look up and you see that name, you remember that, hey, this guy had people go to him. They went to him. They did what they were supposed to do. He did not do what he was supposed to do. And unfortunately, he allowed years more of victims to be victimized because of it.
Dr. Holliday has repeatedly denied having any knowledge of the sex crimes before Mike Kelly and other teachers were arrested. We were unable to reach him for comment today about the petition. We did speak to 3 school board members, Lisa Eastep, Judy Justice, and Nelson Bollier. All of them said they were open to considering the request to rename the stadium.